What if I told you that there is a way to plant a garden that feeds you not just for a season, but for a lifetime? A way to put a seed in the ground once and harvest food from that same plant for 20, 30, even 50 years. This isn't a fantasy. This is the reality of perennial agriculture, a way of growing food that works with nature, not against it. It's a system that our ancestors understood, but that we have almost completely forgotten. And it is a system that holds the key to a future of abundance, resilience, and true food security. Today I want to talk about one of these incredible plants, a vegetable that can produce for 30 years from a single planting. And I want to ask a simple question. If this is possible, why don't we all know about it? My name is Marcus Thornwood. I spent over 3 decades as a plant geneticist, working for the very companies that created our modern food system. I was part of the machine that replaced the diversity of our ancestors' gardens with the fragile monocultures of today. We were so focused on the short-term gains of annual crops, plants that live and die in a single season, that we lost sight of the long-term wisdom of perennials. We created a system that is dependent on an endless cycle of plowing, planting, and purchasing new seeds every single year. It's a system that is incredibly profitable for the corporations that sell the seeds and the chemicals, but it is a system that is destroying our soil, polluting our water, and leaving us vulnerable to the shocks of a changing climate. I walked away from that world because I believe there is a better way, and it starts with understanding the power of plants that endure. Let's talk about asparagus. Its story begins not in a modern supermarket, but in the wild, on the coasts of the Mediterranean and in Asia Minor. For thousands of years, it was a foraged food, a gift from the earth. The ancient Egyptians were so enamored with it that they offered it up to their gods. The Greeks and Romans prized it not just for its delicate flavor, but for its medicinal properties. They believed it could cure everything from toothaches to heart disease. The Roman Emperor Augustus was so fond of asparagus that he created the asparagus fleet of ships to fetch it from the far reaches of the empire. He had a saying, "Velocis quam asparagi cocantur," which means faster than you can cook asparagus. For him, it was the very definition of speed. But as the Roman Empire fell, the knowledge of asparagus cultivation was lost in much of Europe. It was kept alive in the Arab world and eventually reintroduced to Europe in the 15th century. By the 16th century, it was a delicacy in the courts of France and England, a symbol of wealth and status. Louis XIV of France, the Sun King, was so obsessed with asparagus that he had special greenhouses built at Versailles so that he could eat it year-round. For him, it was a symbol of his power, his ability to command nature itself. But the true magic of asparagus is not in its association with emperors and kings. It is in its incredible resilience, its ability to endure. For many of us, it's a springtime luxury, a bundle of tender green spears that we buy at the grocery store. But asparagus is not just a vegetable. It is a survivor. A single asparagus plant, once established, can continue to produce food for up to 30 years. Think about that. A child born the year you plant an asparagus crown could be graduating from college, and you would still be harvesting food from that same plant. This is what real food security looks like. Not a system of scarcity, but a system of abundance. Not a system that requires constant inputs, but a system that regenerates itself year after year. And it's not just asparagus. Rhubarb, a plant that has been cultivated for its medicinal properties in China for over 4,700 years, can live for half a century in the right spot. I've heard stories of rhubarb patches that have outlived the houses they were planted next to. Silent, edible monuments to a more permanent way of life. There are gardeners who have rhubarb plants that are over 100 years old, passed down through generations. This is a living inheritance, a gift from the past that continues to give in the present. So why did we abandon this incredible system? Why did we trade the long-term security of perennials for the short-term convenience of annuals? The answer lies in the story of the Green Revolution and the rise of industrial agriculture. In the mid-20th century, we became obsessed with yield. We wanted to produce more food, faster, and annual crops, with their rapid growth and their ability to be bred for uniformity, were the perfect fit for this new industrial model. They could be planted in vast monocultures, sprayed with chemical fertilizers and pesticides, and harvested with massive machines. It was a system that was incredibly efficient at producing calories, but it came at a terrible cost. Every year, the plowing and tilling required for annual crops exposes the soil to the wind and the rain, leading to catastrophic erosion. We are losing an estimated 25 to 40 billion tons of fertile topsoil every single year. This is the very foundation of our ability to grow food, and we are treating it like dirt. The founder of the Land Institute, Wes Jackson, put it best when he said, "Soil is more important than oil. Soil is as much of a non-renewable resource as oil, and our current system is burning through it at an alarming rate. Perennial plants, on the other hand, are the guardians of the soil. With their deep, permanent root systems, they hold the soil in place, preventing erosion. They build soil health, creating a rich ecosystem of microbes and fungi. An annual wheat plant has roots that are about half a meter long and temporary. A perennial grain like kernza, developed by the Land Institute, has roots that can plunge 3 meters deep into the earth. These roots are not just anchors. They are channels, bringing water and nutrients up from deep in the soil, making the plant incredibly drought resistant. They are carbon sinks, pulling carbon out of the atmosphere and storing it safely in the ground, where it belongs. So why aren't our fields filled with these incredible plants? One reason is that they are slower to establish. You have to be patient. An asparagus bed can take 2 to 3 years to really get going. In our world of instant gratification, that can seem like a long time to wait. But it is an investment that pays dividends for decades. Another reason is that perennial crops are not as profitable for the big agricultural corporations. A farmer who plants a field of asparagus doesn't need to buy new seeds every year. A family with a rhubarb patch in their backyard doesn't need to rely on the grocery store for their spring desserts. Being self-sufficient is the enemy of corporate profit. And so, the knowledge of these plants, the seeds, the techniques for growing them have been pushed to the margins, kept alive by home gardeners and small-scale farmers, but largely forgotten by the mainstream. But a revolution is quietly taking place. At the Land Institute in Kansas, which was founded in 1976, scientists like Lida Hahn are working to bring perennial grains back to the center of our food system. They have spent decades domesticating wild perennial grasses, creating new crops like kernza that offer the best of both worlds, the nutritional value of a grain and the ecological benefits of a perennial. It's a slow, painstaking process, but it is already bearing fruit. Perennial rice, developed in China with support from the Land Institute, now matches the yields of annual rice, while dramatically reducing the need for labor, water, and chemical inputs. General Mills is already incorporating kernza into its breakfast cereals. This is not a distant dream. This is happening now. Let me tell you a story. A few years ago, I visited a small farm in Minnesota, not far from where I grew up. The farmer, a man in his 70s named David, was one of the first to plant kernza commercially. He showed me his fields, and the difference between the kernza and the neighboring fields of annual wheat was stark. The wheat field was a uniform sea of green, but the soil was bare and exposed between the rows. The kernza field was a dense, diverse ecosystem, a polyculture of grasses and legumes, buzzing with insects and birds. The soil was dark and rich, covered in a thick layer of mulch. David told me about the farm crisis of the 1980s, how his family had almost lost everything because of the high interest rates and the low grain prices. "We were doing everything we were told to do," he said, his voice thick with the memory of that difficult time. "We were planting fence row to fence row. We were using all the latest chemicals. We were chasing yield, just like everyone else, and we were still going broke." I remember the sleepless nights, the fear of losing the land that had been in my family for generations. It felt like we were on a treadmill, running faster and faster, just to stay in the same place. He paused, and his gaze drifted out over the field of Kernza. When I first heard about perennial grains, I was skeptical. It sounded too good to be true. But I was desperate. I knew I couldn't keep farming the way I was. It was destroying the land, and it was destroying me. He stooped down and picked up a handful of soil from the Kernza field. It was dark and crumbly, teeming with life. "This," he said, holding it out to me, "this is what it's all about. This is real wealth. Not the number on a check from the grain elevator, but this. The life in this soil." He looked out at his field of Kernza, and his eyes shone with a quiet pride. "This," he said, "this is different. This feels like farming with nature, not against it. It feels like I'm healing the land, not just taking from it." In that moment, I saw the future of agriculture. It wasn't in a corporate laboratory. It wasn't in a boardroom in St. Louis or a research facility in Switzerland. It was in that field, in the deep roots of the Kernza, in the wisdom of a farmer who had the courage to step off the treadmill of industrial agriculture and try something new. It was in the hands of people who understood that the health of the land and the health of the people who work it are inseparable. And this is not an isolated case. Across the country and around the world, farmers are rediscovering the wisdom of perennial agriculture. In the rolling hills of Wisconsin, dairy farmers are planting Kernza as a cover crop, using it to protect their soil from erosion while also producing a valuable grain. In the arid landscapes of the American Southwest, researchers are experimenting with perennial sorghum, a crop that can survive with a fraction of the water required by annual grains. In the rice paddies of Yunnan province in China, farmers are growing perennial rice, a crop that has been developed over the past 2 decades and now matches the yields of annual varieties, while requiring far less labor and fewer chemical inputs. These are not just experiments. They are the seeds of a new agricultural revolution. A revolution that is not based on the conquest of nature, but on a partnership with it. A revolution that is not driven by the pursuit of short-term profit, but by the long-term goal of creating a food system that is truly sustainable, truly resilient, and truly just. So, what can you do? You can start by planting a perennial. Plant an asparagus bed. It's easier than you think. Find a sunny spot in your garden, prepare the soil with plenty of compost, and plant the crowns. For the first couple of years, let the plant grow, establishing its deep root system. In the 3rd year, you can begin to harvest, but only for a few weeks. A good rule of thumb is to only ever harvest about 30% of the plant's growth at a time. This allows the plant to continue to photosynthesize and store energy for the next year. As the years go by, you can extend the harvest season, and for the next 3 decades, you will have a supply of fresh, delicious, and incredibly nutritious food right in your own backyard. Plant a rhubarb crown. Give it a home in a corner of your garden, and it will reward you with a lifetime of pies, crumbles, and jams. Explore the world of other perennial vegetables. Jerusalem artichokes, which produce delicious tubers that you can harvest all winter long. Perennial kales that you can pick from year-round. Sorrel, with its tangy, lemony leaves that are one of the first greens to appear in the spring. Consider Egyptian walking onions, which produce bulbils at the top of their stalks that fall over and plant themselves, literally walking across your garden over the years. Or Good King Henry, a leafy green that was once a staple in European cottage. gardens, but has been almost completely forgotten. Think about sea kale, a coastal plant that was a delicacy in Victorian England, with blanched shoots that taste like a cross between asparagus and celery. Or Turkish rocket, a perennial brassica that produces tender leaves and edible flowers from early spring until late fall. Each of these plants represents a different piece of the puzzle, a different way of building a garden that is not just productive, but resilient. A garden that can weather droughts and floods, pests and diseases, because it is built on a foundation of diversity and permanence. A garden that is not just a source of food, but a source of beauty, of wonder, of connection to the natural world. By planting these perennials, you are doing more than just growing food. You are casting a vote for a different kind of food system. You are becoming a producer, not just a consumer. You are taking a small step towards food sovereignty, towards a future where you are not dependent on a fragile, globalized supply chain for your survival. You are building soil. You are sequestering carbon. You are creating a more beautiful, more resilient, and more delicious world. I want to share one more story with you. A few years ago, I was talking to an old farmer at a market in upstate New York. He was selling asparagus, and I asked him how long his beds had been producing. He smiled and said, "My grandfather planted those beds. He came back from the war in '45, and the first thing he did was plant asparagus. My father ate from those beds. I ate from those beds. And now, my grandchildren are eating from them." Think about that. 4 generations, nourished by the same plants. A living connection to the past, a gift to the future. This is the power of perennial agriculture. It is a system that is not based on extraction, but on regeneration. It is a system that is not based on short-term profit, but on long-term abundance. It is a system that is not based on a war against nature, but on a deep and respectful partnership with it. And it is a system that is available to all of us. You don't need a big farm. You don't need a lot of money. You just need a small patch of soil, a little bit of knowledge, and the patience to let nature do its work. You can start today. You can plant a seed that will feed your family for generations to come. You can become a part of the solution. You can become a part of the perennial revolution. I want to leave you with one final thought. The word perennial comes from the Latin words per, meaning through, and annus, meaning year, through the years. It is a word that speaks of endurance, of persistence, of a deep and abiding connection to time. In our fast-paced, disposable culture, we have lost our connection to the perennial. We have been taught to value the new, the novel, the fleeting. But the truth is that the things that sustain us, the things that truly nourish us, are the things that last. A healthy soil, a strong community, a deep and abiding love for the earth. These are the perennial values that we must reclaim if we are to build a future that is worthy of our children. So I encourage you, go outside. Look at your yard, your community garden, your local park. See the potential for abundance that is all around you. And then take the first step. Plant a perennial and watch it grow. Because real food security doesn't come from a corporation. It comes from the knowledge in your head and the plants growing at your feet. What about you? Do you have a story about a perennial plant that has been in your family for generations? Or is there a perennial vegetable that you love to grow? Share your stories in the comments below. Let's create a new conversation about what it means to be truly nourished. Let's remember what our ancestors knew. And let's start to build a future where our food is once again a source of health, of culture, and of freedom.